Right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, in the Civic Centre chamber here in Harrogate. We have a little technical issue. This is the meeting of a Harrogate and Knaresborough Area Planning Committee. No, I think it's one of the ones over here. Ah, that's it. That's better. Fantastic. I could hear myself speaking twice there, and people would say once is bad enough. My name's Councillor Chris Holdred, and I am the elected representative for High Harrogate and Kingsley and chair of this Harrogate and Knaresborough Area Planning Committee. I normally ask at this point, can people seated in the public gallery confirm that they are able to hear me? And that is you, Rachel. Thank you. And you'll be joining us later in the chamber. So this meeting is being streamed live on YouTube so that the public can view and listen to the meeting remotely. If you have got a mobile phone, can you put it on silent, please, or off? The toilets are just through these doors here on my left and to your right. There's no fire alarm scheduled, so if it does go off, we'll all follow the green man out of this room. Can I ask members, officers and Rachel, if you use the microphone in the chamber, please make sure the mic is close to your mouth and that you speak clearly and loudly. The officers in attendance today to support the meeting are Kate Lavelle on my left here, who is one of the council's solicitors. Going round further to left, we've got Dawn Jury, one of our Democratic Services Officer, and we've got a Senior Democratic Services Officer, Mr. Edward Maxwell. And then to my right here, we've got the planning team, Kate Broadbank, who is the Development Manager, Team Manager, and Mike Parks, who's the Senior Planning Officer and is the case officer responsible for this case. So before we move into the agenda, I should remind everyone that this meeting is being streamed live publicly and therefore is accessible to a wide audience. In accordance with usual practice of public meetings, I look forward to a respectful debate between members. And as always, the first item on the agenda is apologies for absence. And I believe, Dawn, we have one member not with us.
That's correct, Chairman. Thank you very much. Councillor Hannah Gosler has given her apologies today.
Okay, and before we get into the nitty-gritty, we do have to approve two sets of minutes. We have got minutes from the meeting on the 28th of October. That was the single item Harrogate spring water item. And I can tell you who was there if you want, so we know who can propose it. Councillors Mann, Broadbank, Lacey and Walker were the councillors present at that one. And the other set is our most recent meeting on the 25th of November, which is again the single item, the Burley Park industrial site. So we'll take those both together if we can. So can I have a councillor who was present at both of those meetings, Councillor Broadbank, and have we got a seconder? Yeah, please, if you could. Seconder, Councillor Mann. So all in favour of those two sets of minutes being a correct record? And that's unanimous, so that's great. Thank you. And we don't have to do abstentions and those against. So we will now move on to declarations of interest. Has anybody got any disclosures of interest above and beyond those of a normal member of the public on the item of the agenda? I can't see any, so we'll take that there isn't. And we do now move to the single planning item on the agenda, which is 12 Isles Lane, Knaresborough. And it's 2 dwellings, and Mike is going to present his report.
Good afternoon, thank you, Chairman. Yes, to update the report, there's one further representation received for those noted in the report, The matters raised, nevertheless, cover those set out in the report, but with an added issue of Knaresborough having contributed more than its fair share of housing. There's no planning policy seeking to balance housing supply between settlements. Indeed, with the presence of a national landscape and the green belts, the extent of land that sensibly can be used for housing development is restricted. Further, central government policy set out in the MPPF is to direct housing to sustainable locations with alternate means of transport readily available. In a largely rural district, that does mean the majority of housing development will be directed to the main settlements, of which Knaresborough is one. So the site is on the northwest side of Isles Lane. The access already serves number 12, which you can see to the right of the access there, and also a dwelling alongside the road frontage as well.
We haven't got any map, Mike.
I'm sharing it.
That's it. Thank you very much. Yep, we're there.
Oh, right. Sorry, I was looking at that one. That's what's throwing me. Right. So, yeah, as I say, the access presently serves number 12 Isles Lane, as well as a dwelling to the south east of the access as well. And then the application site is a land to the rear. Beyond that, number 5, which is the wider property on Gracious Street, is a listed building. So the application is on that land at the rear to site 2 dwellings, one a 3-bed, one a 4-bed, sort of right angles to each other, using the existing access, garages at the ends of the properties, and a turning area between them. So the properties are of that form. I use the phrase coach house, I don't know if that's strictly correct, but it sort of gives that sort of impression with the arched openings on the frontages there. The garages, as I say, are set to one side. The top dwelling, the dwelling on the dwelling on the sorry, the directions there. The dwelling on the eastern side of the site. There is a sycamore tree on that boundary which has died or is dying. The location of that property, whether that tree was alive or not, is not material. So it's not a case that tree can be considered to be deliberately been caused to die to allow this development to take place. So that's the layout of the properties. I say one's got 4 beds, the other one's got 3 beds there. So this is the tree plan. As you can see, T8 is the one that's got the red line around it. That is a sycamore that's got to go. There was a previous refusal of an application for 3 on this site, with an access running along that boundary where T3 to T8 are. And the reasons for refusal for that were the effect on the trees and also the loss of the boundary wall. We've also received a letter or a representation expanding on an earlier representation. That refers to the setting of a listed building being permanently changed. That's a listed building at number 5 Gracious Street, which on the left-hand drawing there you can see is highlighted in yellow. You've also got a property on Isles Lane, number 10, I think, which is also a listed building, but the relationship of that to the application site is obstructed by the presence of 12 and 10A, so there's no actual impact at all of that development on that listed building. Reference is erroneously made to the previous application being refused to the ecological value of the grassland that formerly existed. The actual reason behind that previous application, as I explained, is it was the loss of the trees in terms of ecology and the ecological impact that tree loss would have. The use of the existing grassland for residential development at that time was not opposed. As I said, the dead sycamores at the southwest corner of the site and is not on the boundary with the listed building. The listed building at 5 Gracious Street dates from the 18th century, and whilst the applicant's dwelling is a mid to late 19th century adoption and formation of a dwelling house, that today is regarded as a building of local interest, as shown on the right of those drawings. although there's no actual associated commentary in the conservation area character statement. Changing the setting of listed buildings therefore occurred previously through the development of the applicant's dwelling those years ago. Any visual relationship between these two properties has evolved over time and do not form part of a planned arrangement. The height of the proposed dwellings along the west side of the site is at 7.4 metres. That, compared to the larger proportions of the existing 12 aisles lane, that will not wholly interrupt that evolved relationship. And the existing trees on the boundary of the listed building will also add an element of mitigation. Due to the size of the site, which if you include the access is over 0.1 of a hectare, and rather than the number of dwellings, a consultation is needed with Historic England, and that's now been sent. However, on developments such as this, Historic England defer usually to any advice from the Council's conservation officers. We have actually sought a response from the Conservation Officer and obtained that today. The Conservation Officer's view is that whilst there is a less than significant harm to the conservation area, he doesn't think the setting of the listed building is harmed. Reference is made to the spaces or in the standard representation also as being important as the buildings in the conservation area. However, the character appraisal does not identify that land as being important. There's also reference made to regularisation of the stone boundary wall on the Owls Lane frontage. That's the actual gate post. There was permission refused for that gate post as it stands, but that now is that long ago. There's probably an argument to say it's got permission by default, and that in any case is incidental rather than being part of the applications before members. The other point the expanded details pick up on is the location of a pond in the grounds of the listed building. There's actually two ponds, it transpires, and there's a very active frog pond close to the boundary with the application site. However, no presence of great crested newts is stated. There is a reference in 2017 of great crested newts being found on Fish Fields next to the swimming baths. That's separated from the application site by somewhat an extent of suburban development, which does not attract a passage for the species. An appropriate informative, however, could be attached to the application. So as I say, that's the conservation area plan of important open space. As you can see, the site is not mentioned, not picked up on that at all. So this is looking around the site. So on this photo, you've got there in the corner, nearest tree is a sycamore, which is said to be dying. And then you've got the properties beyond there with a block of garages along the boundary. Swinging round, looking around the site. This is the view with the listed building in the background there. And you can see that then there's a couple of old shed buildings on the site used for storage purposes. So the recommendation for members is as printed, but with a variation, that being that it's for the completion of a legal agreement, but also the receipt of comments from Historic England raising no objections. In the event Historic England do raise objections, the application will return to this committee for further consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. So for purposes of transparency, I should inform the public watching on YouTube that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us did go down to Isles Lane this morning, well, at lunchtime, and had a site visit there, which was very informative. So thank you for that, Mike. So 5 out of 6 of us have actually been on site and seen the location, the walls, the sycamore tree, etc. I would remind members now that we're into questions to the officer, Mike, and I also would remind members this is the only person we can question on the application. So don't be afraid to come forward with questions. We cannot question the agent, and we certainly can't question the division member because he's not with us, but he has prepared a statement which Dawn will read shortly. So questions to the officer, please. Councillor Haslam.
Thank you, and thank you for helping us at the site visit. I have a couple of questions. The first question is really, bear in mind the shortage of building land supply, why this isn't getting more houses on this space, because if you look at the, so I'd like you to outline why it perhaps shouldn't have maybe 3 houses or even 4 on that space. And then the other thing is, I'm just looking at the conditions, and there doesn't seem to be any condition that says how this area needs to be restored at the end of this. And I'm particularly keen on what planting, etc., and whether we can, as officers, should we, or as councillors, should we agree to this, that how much we can influence that condition. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I think if I can show the plan of the layout, possible. Maybe not possible. Oh, it is possible. Yeah, I think just looking at that, you can see how the 2 dwellings work there. You've got the access coming in, you've got a dwelling off to the left, you've got the one off to the right. Try and get a 3rd dwelling in there. You've got how you're going to fit the parking in. It's going to get quite convoluted, I think. So you can't get, highways would normally only accept 5 off a private driveway. So 3 would be the most development you could get on here. But it's difficult to see how you're going to do that without putting cars in front of a neighbour's windows, getting, you know, access in. So I think this scheme works. I've got concerns over how you get 3 on. You've also got to bear in mind the site is constrained by the adjacent trees. So you could, if the trees weren't there, you could probably get 3 on because you've got more area to play on. But you've got to have regard not only to the position of the buildings, but also the garden area amenity that the people have got, that they're not overshadowed by having a property which is pushing their garden under the trees as such. There is a condition on the permission, condition 11, which does require a detailed scheme for landscaping. So in terms of tidying the site up, that would be covered under the details of that condition. Thank you, Chairman.
Would you like to come back, Councillor Haslam?
I have some comments about some of the ecology. Should we actually perhaps pass this, but I don't know what the situation is at the moment, so I will leave that alone. Thank you.
Okay, any other councillors with questions to the officer? A deathly silence descends. I've got a couple actually, Mike. I'm a little bit concerned about the access because it's direct from Isles Lane. It obviously passes the applicant's present abode, which is fine. They're not going to object to that. But I'm presuming the access is protected forever. Otherwise, there's issues there. Because if the current applicant moves from that house and somebody else comes who isn't so keen on access to those new properties, presumably there's some protection to the people who are going to live in those houses.
I would assume that's a private matter between the parties involved. I mean,
Kate's not nodding her head. No, I don't know who to go to here. We've got 2 Kates, haven't we? Go for it, Kate.
Shall I turn mine on? I was just going to say that's normally sorted out in the transfers to the individual property owners. So it's one of the things a solicitor would check. I would imagine that access is kept in perpetuity for these houses and that it's part of the transfer.
Okay, so what you're saying is it's not really a planning thing. But obviously, if there was ever a dispute about that access there, it's really important to the people who are buying those houses because there's nowhere else for them to get that access. But we're assuming that is going to be sorted out by solicitors, who are wonderful people and will do that, obviously.
Yes, there'll be restrictive covenants on the
Okay.
title, I would imagine.
Fine, that satisfies me there. You've mentioned the Historic England, and so they are being consulted. If they do come back, we'll bring it back to committee. So that's sorts. If they object, sorry, we'll bring it back to committee. Can you just revisit that plan of open spaces for me? Because we went over that quite quickly. And I'd just like to see that again, if it was all possible. I think, is this from the conservation? Yeah, it's the one with all the greenery. So just point me out, Mike, where the actual application is on that map. Right, I can see. So D is the big area of green there. That's Knaresborough House, etc. The church, is it? The castle, right. You know, it's like the back of your hand, Councillor Lacey, don't you? I've got
C
my...
and D are just the character areas in the conservation area appraisal, and they're not identifying a particular feature of this plan.
Yeah. So it hasn't been identified because a lot of the correspondence and the objectives were saying it's a green area and we should be looking after green areas. But actually it's always been private land. You can't actually see it from Isles Lane, can you? You can from overlooking the houses if you have a house there. But and it's not on this plan, crucially. Okay, thank you for that. Okay, any further questions? Do you want to ask your question about net gain? Whilst we're here, Councillor Haslam?
Yeah, I just noticed. I appreciate there will be some net gain done in elsewhere, but when I was walking round, I was particularly concerned about laurel trees in there, which aren't particularly conducive to anything else growing underneath them or around them. So, I would have thought the ecologist will probably, but may not, but maybe wants a prompt as to perhaps we should have those taken out, such that trees that are A, indigenous, and B, actually promote better biodiversity. Thank you.
If the committee wish, we could put an informative on requiring a landscaping scheme to seek the removal of those and replacement planting of appropriate species.
Do we all agree that's a good idea? I think that's a good idea. Yeah, we're getting nods. Nobody's objecting to that. So thank you, Mike. We will request that as a condition. Okay, so no more. I'm taking no more questions to the officer here. No, so we'll move on. The division member is entitled to a 5-minute statement, and in fact, it's the division members. And because that's why we're here today, because Councillor Walker, the appropriate division member, has actually called this in. Unfortunately, he can't be here today because he's working, but he has drafted a statement, and Dawn is going to read it on his behalf. Now, normally that would be very confusing because she'd have to give herself cards as well, saying, but I happen to know you've timed this anyway, and you know it's well within the 5 minutes allocated. So, Dawn, would you like to read us Councillor Walker's statement, please?
Chair, members of the committee, I urge you to refuse this application for 2 dwellings at 12 Isles Lane. While housing need is acknowledged, this proposal fails to meet key requirements of the Harrogate Local Plan and National Planning Guidance and raises serious concerns about process. Firstly, heritage and conservation. The site lies within the Knaresborough Conservation Area and forms part of the curtilage of Thorncroft, a recognised building of local interest. A non-designated heritage asset. The applicant's own heritage statement confirms the garden has remained open since the 19th century, contributing to the historic form and spatial character of the conservation area. Building two houses here erodes that openness and harms both the NDHA's setting and the conservation area's character. This is contrary to local plan policy HP2 and MPPF Chapter 16, which require harm to heritage assets to be avoided unless outweighed by public benefits. The applicant admits less than substantial harm, yet offers no meaningful public benefit of equivalent heritage value. Biodiversity net gain will be delivered entirely off-site, so it does nothing to enhance Knaresborough's green character. Crucially, the council did not consult its conservation officer on an application involving a designated heritage asset. That omission conflicts with statutory duties and national guidance. Second, local distinctiveness and design. Policy HP3 requires development to respect scale and spatial qualities. These dwellings introduce a suburban design with brick and slate in an area dominated by stone and render, and they disrupt the historic garden pattern behind Thorncroft. This does not reinforce local distinctiveness. Third, green infrastructure and biodiversity. The site previously contained orchard and mature trees. A sycamore recorded as healthy in 2023 is now dead, yet no clear investigation was undertaken. Reliance on off-site biodiversity credits conflicts with policy NE3, which prioritises on-site mitigation. Simply replacing a mature tree does not offset heritage or ecological harm. Fourth, highways. Isles Lane is a narrow, congested route leading to King James School. Although it is designated as a two-way street, in reality, it can only accommodate one-way traffic, a fact the committee will have observed during their site visit this morning. An established local business, Nidal Winders, already faces weekly challenges with skip deliveries, and this development would only compound those difficulties. Introducing construction traffic and additional residents will significantly increase risks for pedestrians and cyclists. Simply extending double yellow lines through a Section 106 agreement is a reactive measure, not a long-term solution. Finally, process and governance. Correspondence between a resident and the council shows serious shortcomings. Concerns raised in July were answered only days before committee, breaching MPPF principles of early and transparent engagement. No evidence of enforcement checks on site works that may have harmed trees. Over-reliance on replacement planting, contrary to the mitigation hierarchy in national guidance. These issues undermine confidence in decision-making. In conclusion, this application conflicts with policies HP2, HP3, NE3, NE5, NE7 and TI1 and fails to meet the design and heritage principles of the MPPF. Combined with procedural failings and lack of specialist consultation, the harm to the conservation area and historic garden land far outweighs the limited benefit of two dwellings. I respectfully urge the committee to refuse this application. Thank you. That's Councillor Matt Walker, North Yorkshire Councillor for Knaresborough West.
Thank you, Dawn, and thank you, Councillor Walker, for that statement. If he was here, we couldn't ask him questions anyway. There were some questions there which I think the officer did pick up on his report. Certainly, we have consulted with the conservation officer, because you did mention that. I don't know whether any of the two officers here have got any response to that. You don't have to, and we wouldn't be able to question Councillor Walker, as I said. But there was an awful lot of policies there quoted, which members may want to bear in mind when we come to the debate. Okay. We do allow the Town Council to make a representation as well, if they so desire, but I understand, Dawn, there's no, they haven't made a representation either for or against, and obviously they're not with us today. Is that the case? This is
They
Knaresborough Town
certainly haven't
Council.
contacted me to request that someone comes along to speak, no.
Okay. And am I right, they haven't made a comment officially? For or against? Just checking the report. And then it'll be you, Rachel. So if you want to make your way forward now whilst we're checking this.
The Knaresborough Town Council objected to the application on the basis of overdevelopment of green space in the town.
Thank you. But they haven't obviously come to make that point. Thank you. Okay, so we now come to the agent, and that is Rachel Reaney. And Rachel, you have 5 minutes to address the committee. As I've already laboured the point, we can't ask you any questions. You may wish to address some of the issues that Councillor Walker has raised in his statement there in your 5 minutes. But it will be a very strict 5 minutes. Dawn has got the cards here, so you'll get the 30 seconds to go and the 5 seconds to go. So if you can keep your eyes open for that, I'm sure you've rehearsed this and it will be within the 5 minutes. But the floor is yours, Rachel.
Perfect. Chair, councillors and officers, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. As councillors will be aware, the need for housing in the Harrogate Borough is evidenced by the age of the local plan, now 5 years old, and the council's lack of a 5-year housing land supply at 2.2 years. Being located within the settlement limits and a sustainable location, the principle of development has been accepted by officers, as supported by the benefits outlined in the accompanying report. I would like to address the concerns of the parish council and local residents. Firstly, the site is not accessible, as discussed previously, it's private land, and is not allocated as green space within the local plan, emerging neighbourhood plan or conservation area appraisal, as you would have seen on screen. The land has no meaningful use and is now overgrown and in generally poor condition, as witnessed by councillors today. The site has been in the applicant's family's ownership since the 1960s. Over the years, temporary buildings and improvements have been carried out and fully disclosed to enforcement officers. All waste arising from these works have been appropriately disposed of using skips provided by Wetherby Skip Hire and through a licensed waste carrier. The site has been properly maintained at all times and has neither been neglected nor allowed to become a wasteland. Secondly, the proposed development has been carefully designed to respect the significance of 12 Ills Lane, neighbouring listed buildings and the wider conservation area, and as such would not result in harm to their significance. There would be change, but this does not equate to harm to significance as outlined in the supporting heritage statement prepared by an Institute of Historic Building Conservation accredited specialist. The scale, massing and materials respond positively to the established character of the area, ensuring that key views and overall appreciation of the asset are preserved, with proposals subservient in form. Notwithstanding this, the case officer has concluded a degree of harm, but notes that this is outweighed by the benefits of the scheme. Comments regarding the impact on the proposed development of Swadforth House have been considered as part of the planning process, owing to the presence of intervening development and existing boundary treatments. It's concluded that the proposed scheme would not affect the significance of Swadforth House. Furthermore, it is noted that the protection of a private outlook, even if valued by an individual, does not constitute a material planning consideration. It is not a designated view or vista and makes no contribution towards the significance of the listed building as identified in the supporting heritage statement. Thirdly, the application is for 2 dwellings and has been carefully designed with planning officers to respect the character, scale, fenestration and pattern of development in the surrounding area and has been influenced by previous applications. Importantly, overdevelopment is not simply a matter of adding new homes, it is about whether development causes harm to amenity, to character or to infrastructure. In this case, the scheme has been assessed against those criteria and does not result in such harm. The layout provides adequate spacing, the scale and height are subservient, there is no unacceptable loss of light, privacy or outlook to adjacent homes, the site proposes and retains appropriate garden space and avoids a cramped appearance. The loss of a category sycamore tree has been discussed by members, and this has been accepted by the council's tree officer due to structural condition to the far eastern corner. Detailed ecological surveys and a biodiversity net gain strategy have been submitted and approved by the Council's Ecology Officer. In response to comments about the great crested newts within the 2 existing ornamental ponds to the north, it's considered that any likelihood of impact is negligible. Nevertheless, to address any residual risk to great crested newts or other species, mitigation in the form of reasonable avoidance measures can be secured by planning condition, as set out in our reports. The BNG mitigation hierarchy has also been followed, and off-site BNG will be delivered within the North Yorkshire Council's authority area. In policy terms, both national and local planning policy guidance supports the efficient use of land, particularly in sustainable locations such as this, with all other matters addressed and no objections raised from statutory consultees. A Section 106 will be progressed to secure BNG and a traffic regulation order along Eales lanes as requested by the Council's highways officers. In summary, the proposal is considered a policy-compliant design that delivers 2 homes without causing material harm. It respects the character of 12 Eales Lane and Knaresborough Conservation Area and aligns with planning policy and represents a balanced approach to meeting housing needs. Thank you very much for your time.
Spot on with the time there, Rachel. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so we now come to the debate, and any councillor wishing to speak on the matter before we go to a proposal? Councillor Haslam.
I don't know who thinks the area that where we're looking at the building is anything other than a complete tip. It should not be allowed to have got into that situation, and so I cannot see any current benefit of leaving that piece of land as it is. So I am, so I can't see a reason to stop this particular or to object to this particular development. It can only enhance that current area. I listened to all the different debate there, but having visited and having walked round very carefully and looking at things, I just feel that this area needs to be sorted. And if it was open access, then I think people would be complaining bitterly as to what a mess it is. So I can only say that I support this this application. Thank you, Chair.
I think Councillor Mann, you had your hand up.
I accept that the development does have a minor impact on residential amenity and probably also on the conservation area. But at the same time, I think that's outweighed in the balance by the benefits of the development. And I think those benefits are several and possibly manifold. As we heard, we've only got a land supply figure, I think it was 2.2 was quoted. We need 5 years worth of land supply to achieve our local plan targets, so we're way below that. And I do think these 2 houses make a useful contribution towards housing supply in Knaresborough. The development will bring modest benefits from that point of view, and also economic benefits. Obviously, the people who occupy those houses will need carpets and white goods, etc., etc. So that will all increase demand and hopefully growth in the town. So on balance, I think that although there is less than substantial harm caused by the 2 dwellings, I think that's far outweighed by the benefits of this development. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Councillor Lacey.
Thank you. I've been a resident in the area of Knaresborough for 35 years, and also for 4 years, between 2019 and 23, I owned a property on York Place, which could be suggested as overlooking, but I don't think it really does overlook. I've not been aware of this piece of what one might call brownfield land, either being accessible or desirable in terms of its features, and I can only see this as a positive contribution with the conditions, and I agree that with Paul in terms of taking the opportunity to be more appropriate in terms of species. So I think that's been a helpful suggestion. but I've got no reason to suggest that this should be left as it is, or indeed other alternatives proposed. So I would be in support of approving this proposal.
Okay, Councillor Broadbank or Councillor Windus, if either of you want to make a contribution? Councillor Broadbank.
Just to, yeah, I've heard everything about the application, read the report. I support the application. I can't see any reason why it shouldn't go ahead.
Thank you. Councillor Windus, I don't know, you're the only one who hasn't. No, okay, no contribution. And the only thing I would say is Rachel was talking to us and said the BNG would be within the North Yorkshire area. I'd like to be a little bit more specific than that. Can we condition it that it's within the parish of Knaresborough? Because I don't think biodiversity net gain somewhere in the wilds of Richmondshire will be of any benefit whatsoever to the citizens of Knaresborough. Is that something we can do? I don't even know if we can do that.
That's for details, don't we? There's a condition. You'll find the condition when you want to find it, but the condition, condition 5, got to give us details of written evidence from a local habitat bank. The usual local habitat bank is, for most applications currently, is west of Ripon. It's where there's been a designated area for that to take place. So the ecologists will have details of where they are. I can see and I can ask if there is anything closer to Knaresborough, but the best we can really say is a local habitat bank, which the council would have details of.
Okay, so I suppose that's a little bit nearer than my illusion of Richmond, and that is a common practice thing, as you've just pointed out. So that makes me a little bit more comfortable with that, and I'm sure the applicant will do the best to get it as local as possible. Rachel's nodding, so that's good. Okay, so having said all that, Councillor Lacey.
Just on that point, and I saw that you were nodding, and that whilst in principle it could be wider, I would support that conversation with Knaresborough Town Council and perhaps with those who are adjacent to. Knaresborough is quite a sort of close-knit community, and to see the benefit coming back locally would be a good thing.
Yeah, I do think that is important in this particular application as well, because it is a very big space, actually. I was very surprised when we were there, and it presumably was mostly greenery at one stage, although that's been eroded over the years, as has been pointed out. Okay, so we're after a proposer for the motion. We've had quite a few councillors saying they would be in favour, but I think Councillor Mann, would you like to propose that? Have we got a seconder? Councillor Broadbank. So all in favour of the application with the conditions, and particularly the two we've discussed, the Historic England consultation, if it comes back and they object to it, it will come back to committee, and the B&G condition, if we can make as local as possible. So all in favour with those conditions. And sorry, Kate, did you want to come in?
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify. Mike, did you say it should be, it's deferred, isn't it? For approval. Oh, sorry, it's minded to approve, subject to English, the consultee coming back. Yeah, so minded, so you can't actually grant it today, but it's minded to approve. And subject to consultee, and subject to, there was a condition, was there? The legal agreement, and was there another informative that you wanted to put in, or nothing else?
The one about the trees.
The one about the trees? Yeah. Okay, sorry, it's just for Dawn's benefit.
No, that's fine, and we need to be very, very clear
on what you're voting on.
Yes.
Yeah, there was also the piece on
That was actually, that's in the documentation, isn't it, already? Oh, perhaps not, but
So
But we're
this
adding
is the
that.
second informative, is it?
Councillor Haslam?
Yeah, and also the piece about the planting, the planting of species.
Planting.
That's
I
what
got
Mike,
that one,
Mike
yes,
was
I
just
didn't know about the
alluding
roots.
to there. So with all those things wrapped up, and yes, technically you're quite correct, Kate, we can't actually grant it, but subject to those conditions and minded to, yeah. So I take it the proposal and the seconder still stands, yeah. So all in favour? Any abstentions? Okay. And nobody against, because there's nobody left. Right, okay. So that as we're minded to approve. And thank you very much. And there are no other items on the agenda. And the date of the next meeting is Tuesday, the 27th of January at 2 o'clock. And there may well be more people in the room for that one than this one. But we'll wish everyone a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, and we'll come back in January. Thank you.